When Beijing bans dozens of American companies, headlines scream that China has committed economic suicide to punish Washington. This narrative assumes these moves are defensive reactions born of desperation. But if you look past the outrage and examine the incentives, a different reality emerges. These export controls were never designed as a shield. They are an offensive strategy accelerating forced decoupling. The stakes are not just about trade numbers today, but who holds leverage in 10 years when American technology is no longer needed to keep China running. The prevailing view suggests that by cutting ties with U.S. markets, Beijing is hurting its own economy for the sake of a political point. This logic fails because it ignores the concept of strategic autonomy over short-term profit. The reality is far more calculated. Facing restricted access to advanced semiconductors and critical technologies through American export controls, China has shifted from maximizing profits to entering what analysts call survival mode innovation. In this phase, state-directed investment targets domestic substitution for any technology previously imported. Every time Washington hits a Chinese firm with sanctions or procurement bans, it inadvertently funds the very supply chain independence that will eventually leave the U.S., dependent on a rival who no longer needs them. This dynamic creates a specific timeline for change. The logic of this strategy relies on accepting short-term economic pain and alienating key partners today to eliminate vulnerability 5 to 10 years from now. While Washington plays an election cycle or annual budget game, Beijing is playing a decade-long chess match focused on survival mode innovation. As indigenous supply chains mature in critical sectors like chip manufacturing, the leverage held by Washington evaporates. Once China achieves self-reliance, future conflicts will carry significantly higher costs for the United States because Beijing can no longer be coerced via simple supply chain cuts. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. The mechanism driving this shift is not just economic, it is a regulatory arms race that traps companies in compliance minefields. The U.S. has become the world's sanctions superpower, imposing 3 times as many measures as any other nation globally. However, these unilateral tools often lack multilateral enforcement for goods traded worldwide. In response to American extraterritorial rules like the Foreign Direct Product Rule designed to restrict entities such as Huawei, Beijing enacted its anti-foreign sanctions law in 2021. This legal framework empowers China to censure foreign companies that comply with sanctions harming Chinese interests. The result is a reciprocal dynamic where tit-for-tat actions escalate tensions rather than de-escalate them. Global businesses now face impossible choices: obey Washington and risk being punished by Beijing, or follow local laws and violate American restrictions. To understand the scale of this resilience, one must look at historical precedents regarding how states react to existential threats. Data suggests that unilateral sanction regimes often fail against determined state actors because they do not account for a shift in national priorities from market access to survival. The Russian case serves as a critical parallel here. Despite comprehensive sanctions from the G7 following its invasion of Ukraine, Russia's export volumes stabilized at pre-war levels within months. This indicates that when faced with threats to strategic autonomy, states will prioritize keeping their economy running over maintaining relationships with adversaries. China is likely applying this same logic to technology sectors. The paradox for Washington is profound. Current sanction strategies are effectively becoming sunk costs. These resources spent on imposing controls fail to deter aggression in a crisis scenario, while simultaneously accelerating the timeline for Chinese self-reliance. The U.S. trades its most powerful leverage, access to advanced tech and markets, for temporary political concessions that may not hold when they matter most. As China builds these domestic supply chains over the next 5 to 10 years, the returns on current sanctions will diminish rapidly. This leaves the United States with fewer tools to manage great power competition while becoming increasingly dependent on Chinese raw materials like rare earths and manufacturing capacity. It can no longer easily cut off without hurting itself. The dependency trap is real. By trying to force China into submission through economic isolation, Washington has accelerated a timeline where that leverage becomes useless. When the clock hits 10 years, Beijing will have its own ecosystem for advanced tech, rendering American export controls obsolete as a weapon of statecraft. The question then shifts from whether sanctions hurt China economically to who is actually losing strategic ground in this long-term competition. The answer lies in understanding that these bans are not defensive but offensive bids to build self-reliance through necessity. Every restriction imposed today acts as an accelerant for Chinese independence, turning American leverage into a ticking clock that will eventually leave Washington dependent on a rival who no longer needs them. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.